Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Ready Steady Podcast Essen release special. I've got Chris back joining me because Chris is coming to Essen with me, although I think we'll probably hear some stuff from Barry later as well about what folks are excited to see coming out at Essen. Welcome to the podcast, Chris.
Hello, thank you for having me back. Great to be here.
And we've put together a list of sort of stuff that we're excited about, stuff that's coming out. And I'll preempt this just by saying, it's always a bit difficult to put these lists together because, it's very easy to get wrapped up in all the new and exciting things and also just the stuff you missed. And by the same token, because we're content creators and we get, to play stuff in advance and also the way Kickstarter releases work, some of the stuff we will have already played or seen. So I'm not going to go into the full details of how I compiled my list and what I excluded. But I will say, that if there's a glaring omission, it's possibly because I've already played it or seen it. But these are some stuff that I certainly haven't had the exposure to yet that I would like, and I'm hyped about checking out.
Very good. We have a bunch of honorable mentions as well. Do you want to get those out of the way first?
Yeah, the honorable mentions are certainly things that fit into this sort of category of we don't know enough, or we haven't sort of been able to find out stuff, or they haven't posted a rule book yet. And so, why don't we do the honorable mentions first, and we'll get sort of into a bit more detail about the stuff we've had a chance to look at a bit later on. I mean, I'll take the first one just because I've got it down here. Mm-hmm. But this is actually something we saw at the UKG in June, and it's Battalion War of the Ancients, designed by Paolo Mori and Francesco Cirocci, and published by Osprey Games. I was really excited to see this. It's sort of a head-to-head resource management war game with multiple fronts, I think. And it's largely sort of cards, and then you've got these very precious resources that you'll use to empower units and manage your different fronts. There's an aspect of army building that preempts each battle as well, where you can sort of really power up units, or you can go broad, and each comes with different logistical challenges. So I was really excited to learn more about that. Now, allegedly, it's coming out at Essen, but they still haven't posted a rule book. So I can't tell you any more about that.
That is surprising. Perhaps is it on the app? Is it listed on the Spiel app?
I've not looked at the app. I've looked at the BGG board game preview list, which I have filtered by things that will be available to buy at Essen.
War of the Ancients will be available for the first time ever to demo and for sale at Essen Spiel next week. I don't remember. Did I see this UKG, or was this while I was off doing something else?
I think you were off doing something else.
Okay. This looks interesting, though. Yeah, looks exciting. I mean, as judging a book by its cover goes.
Well, I like Paolo Mori. I like Paolo Mori's lighter games as well, and I don't know Francesco Cirocci, but I have faith. Mm-hmm. So this is why this is an honorable mention.
Excellent. Okay. Well, one of the things I might have been doing whilst at UKG, whilst you were doing this, I might have been off with Ares Games demoing the expansion to the War of the Ring card game, which is the War of the Ring Fires and Swords, which I'm excited about. So I actually have played this. But the reason it's an honorable mention is because it's very much a known entity. It is simply more cards for the War of the Ring the card game. We played a game with it at UKG, and it was really enjoyable to look at new cards and be like, hey, it's the guy from the other thing. It didn't change anything fundamentally. It didn't really introduce any major new mechanics. It was. And you can also now play with 6 players, which I don't think I'll ever be able to do. But
Wow. So that would be 2 teams of 3 then.
That'd be 2 teams of 3, I believe. Yeah. No, wait. Or would it be just 2 teams? Yeah, 2 teams of 3. Yes, that makes most sense thematically.
Well, I was wondering because I can't imagine it would be 3 teams of 2, but I could picture something like a commander style where it's 2 teams of 2 and one commander on either side.
No, I believe it's three. It's 3 decks of 30 cards each, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I talked about War of the Ring, the card game, on an earlier podcast. We played just the core game, 2v2, and I really like it. I really like War of the Ring, the card game. I liked it when I first had a chance to check it out at UKG 2023, and I'm not opposed to more cards, albeit I don't think
2022
personally,
actually, it would be.
20 was it 2022?
Yeah, because it's 2022 last. It was when I think it was because they've already had an expansion, the co-op expansion.
The co-op, which we got at Essen last year.
Yes, which I've played a couple of times, and it's good. It's the same thing again. Yeah, it would be 2022 because the game came out in 2022 at Essen. We demoed at UKG 2022, and then we got it at Essen later that year.
Ooh. Well, so it's a little bit. So it's been around for a little bit then, but it's got amazing art. I mean, Ares has all the access to that lovely John Howe art, and they've sort of tried to stay true to using similar art across the game. And it is a game of logistics and managing those decks of cards, and I personally don't feel like I've had enough exposure to the core game to need more variety in that respect. But I'd certainly be interested in trying the 6-player game, so I'm definitely keen to pick up a copy of this, even if just to have the option of more variety in the future.
Yeah, I definitely haven't scraped the bottom of the barrel of the base content either, but I know I will want more content in due course. Yeah, I really enjoy the game.
Yeah, and I haven't tried it head to head. Have you?
I have actually, yeah.
How was that?
It's good. I saw you can play as you can. I'm trying to think. Can you do the head to head? I think you can do the head to head with just the two pairs of decks mashed together. But I've played I think it's called the Fellowship of the Ring scenario a couple of times, which is basically two custom made decks for 30 card decks, which then only covers the first book. It doesn't feel like it's lacking anything other than the cooperative nature of the full game. I enjoy it quite a bit. It's a lot shorter as well, which has its own benefits. You are a little bit limited insofar as you have to you're seeing a lot less of the content each time. Like if you were to buy this game and only know you're only going to be playing it 2-player, I'd be a little bit more less. I mean, it'd be hard to recommend the base game. But if you know you really like, if you've tried it and you know you like it, then it actually might make me there's more value in the expansion. I don't know if the expansion actually offers anything more for 2-player only. It does say you can play the expansion with 2 players, so that would imply that you can, unless it just means that you can play the base game with 2 players.
But you'll have a better impression of this than me, but I get the sense, having played the card, having played it, that it does feel like it was intended as a 4-player game.
Absolutely, yeah. It's the exact opposite of the War of the Ring board game, which was designed as a 2-player game. Which was designed as a 2-player game, and they were like, there's a lot of logistics here. Maybe we can make it 2v2.
Yeah, you can play that 4-player, but it doesn't really go into any detail about how you should. Well, I mean, it does sort of say how you divide things up, but it doesn't. There's not any interesting mechanisms that play around the concept of 4 players in the War of the Ring.
Exactly, and in fairness, I mean, you could argue, like I said, there's not much in the card game either, because, like I said, the only thing you really feel like you're missing is the collaboration. But I do think that's quite important because the whole table talk strategic conversation that goes on, and what you can and can't afford for your opponents to hear. I think it's certainly at a higher level. It becomes quite important in the game.
Yeah, but there are also baseline strategies that are built into those decks of cards.
With a combo.
the way they combo with each other exactly, and that creates real dilemmas that only work because you're two different people with two different decks of cards.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, you might have them. This might be a bad example. I can't remember which deck it's in, but the Mithril Vest. You might really want to give it to Sam.
Well,
but
yeah. So well, I was going to say actually that the player with the Aragorn deck, because they're colloquially Aragorn and Frodo, right? The two decks,
that's
or Aragorn
correct,
and
yeah.
Gandalf. Yeah. But the player with the Aragorn deck has all the magical characters like the elves and things, and they've got
they
gifts.
They have the elves, but the wizards are in Frodo's deck.
Sorry, I misspoke. What I meant was the ethereal characters, the elves,
Sure.
so the characters they encounter along the journey, and they have all the gifts for the hobbits and the Fellowship. But most of the Fellowship, or at least the hobbits, certainly are in the other deck, and so an important strategy for those two decks is for the Aragorn player to get the gifts into their play area so they can then attach them to the other deck's characters. And that sort of thematically represents the giving of the gifts. But you need to try and coordinate that. And that's really difficult because you're two different people. and managing the logistics of those decks is the whole game. And it's a nightmare. That's the game.
Yeah, but it's a fun nightmare.
It's a great puzzle. I really like it. So I'm definitely excited for this.
Nice. Maybe we'll get a game in. We will have 4 people at Essen. Never know.
Oh god, but Michael hates this game.
Oh yeah, he does. Yeah, that's true. He's played it twice.
Yeah, he has. Yeah, he's a very good sport.
I played with him last time, and I have to ask him. I can never ask him, did he enjoy it more or less than playing with Ricardo?
Well, they had really bad luck as well in that game.
Well, I think they weren't prepared for our rush strategy. They weren't expecting it.
Well, it worked out because we had a busy convention to go and see.
Exactly.
Anyway, right. But honorable mentions continued. I've got. Here's a good one. So I've got Firefighters on Duty. I know this has been getting onto a lot of people's hotness lists.
Yeah, I've seen
this. This is from Artipia Games. This is a re-implementation of Project Elite with a firefighters theme. And Project Elite has been hard to find and out of print for a while. It was originally published by CMON, actually. And it also is pretty imbalanced and inconsistent in its experience. So it's on the topic of Daybreak, which we talked about in the episode 12, a good cooperative game should give you quite consistent scaling options. Project Elite didn't really do that well. And certain combos would just become unwinnable, while others would be far surprisingly manageable. And unless you were au fait with all of the content, which I wasn't because I never owned the game, I only played other people's copies. Unless you were very across all the content, it was very difficult to manage sort of a consistent experience. Having said that, it's a real-time dice chucking game, and I love real-time. I know I'm definitely in a minority there, but I love fun stress, and trying to manage crises under pressure. And I know that you at least have some appetite for that, Chris, because we played XCOM, the board game, on the show.
Yes, so we went to great lengths to play that remotely. Yeah. That's a good point.
Yeah. Each with our own copies set up,
which we had to track down.
App, yeah, a shared version of the app.
Oh, how do we do that? I can't remember. How do we do the shared app?
I think you had it on your computer and you broadcast it to me, something like that.
Good God.
But yeah, so that was quite a technical marvel, but it worked out well, and you can find that stream on the channel.
I'd love to play it again. Yeah, I do have a great appetite for the only thing I don't like about real time is I find co-ops. I find it's too easy to cheat. And you know how I am about cheating in co-op games. Not cheat, not like some malicious cheating. I mean, technically, a co-op game can't really be malicious cheating. But I just find because even I, as you know, I'm very, you know how I'm with co-op games, and if I think we've accidentally helped ourselves, I'll hinder ourselves 10 times over. I find even I can slip up in a real-time co-op game and just give myself I'm doing something as the timer goes, and I'll let myself have that. I just find it a little bit too easy to cheat
Well,
on.
I suppose it would be helpful to have sort of like a definitive clarity on that. And I think a good real time co op game will be clear. If you're in the middle of an action, you must undo it. Or if you are in the middle of an action, you can resolve it. I think if you have the mental capacity to begin a complex action right as the timer's about to run out and then make use of that rule in your favor, then that's skill. Good job. Because a lot of people under that sort of pressure would find it hard to time that sort of thing right.
Yeah,
And that's kind of the skill of coordinating under pressure, isn't it?
yeah, yeah.
Um,
But I definitely
but
have it. I definitely like this. I definitely do like the idea of it.
yeah, so this one obviously replaces the aliens and the space marines with firefighters and a fire. I don't know. I haven't had much more chance to look into it other than that, but I like that theme, and obviously this is sort of a more packaged core set than the sprawling Kickstarter offerings they had previously. So I'm definitely keen to go and check this out in more detail.
Awesome. My next one's also an expansion again, getting this out of the way early. This is White Castle Macha by Devere Games, an expansion to White Castle, or the White Castle. I know nothing about this. As far as I can tell, nobody does, because I have not been able to track down anything regarding it. The only thing I'm aware of is that it gives you an extra action per round, and it gives you a tea room in which to spend those actions. The thing I'm most excited about it is the fact that in the White Castle you only have, I believe, 9 actions over the course of the whole game. That's going to give you 33% extra actions. You're going to be on 12 now. And considering that the main problem with this game is you simply don't have enough time to do all the things you want to do, I think it's amusing that most people seem to be excited for the same reason. Oh my god, I might vaguely be able to implement my strategy correctly.
Yeah, this was a good example of a game that probably wanted to be a little bit longer. They always say like the best games are the ones that end right before you can realize all of your dreams. Because the minute you sort of complete the not to say the strategy, but if you get to the end of a Euro game and you're like, oh, I've got an action, but there's nothing really left I need to do, that means it's too long, right? You want it to end before that. So I think this probably ended slightly too abruptly before people could really implement their full strategy or, get that extra action, because it is a game about drafting these action dice, and what you can do is sort of limited on the roles that have come up and what other people have taken. So it'll be interesting to see what they do, and I think there's a little bit more room. Just hopefully it won't fall then on the wrong side of that equation and become too easy to fulfill all your dreams.
It feels unlikely because first of all,
it feels very unlikely.
Yeah, particularly if they're giving us extra more things to spend these actions on. But even if they hadn't, frankly, I still think that it would have worked out.
But unfortunately, one of the things I like about White Castle is the tiny little box, and there is absolutely no hope of you getting that expansion in that box.
Yeah, I'm kind of hoping that the expansion might come in a big box that's far too big that can fit everything.
All right, yeah. No chance.
Yeah, well.
You'll just have to have 2 boxes now. Or, baggy the expansion, tape it to the outside. Like a savage. I've got one here, actually, that I thought looked quite interesting, and I had a glance over the rules for it. This is called Castle Builder, and this is from Fricks Games. And if you don't know Fricks Games, it is, of course, the company that originally put out Terraforming Mars, so named for the family of designers who run the company. This one is designed by Daniel Frixelius, who is not one of the designers of Terraforming Mars, but has worked on other things. And so this new game is, from what I can tell, is essentially you've got a player board that is the foundations of your castle. And then you're going to build it outwards onto the table by drafting oddly shaped tiles that will allow you to sort of continue upwards or block off areas of the castle. And all of these tiles sort of have bonuses or scoring conditions on, and you end up building sort of like a wonky castle. It reminded me of a vertical version of the horizontal Castles of Mad King Ludwig. And so it's sort of like it's quite a light game by the looks of it. It says it's under an hour, and you've got some kings that are going to move around a marketplace and draft you these tiles that you're then going to slot into your tableau. And I think the concept is that sometimes you might not get the tiles you want, but the idea is to try and get as high as possible, I think, while inserting these sort of bonuses and extra scoring metrics into the castle. And I like the idea of the communal drafting. I like the idea that you could sort of try to position the kings in such a way that maybe someone blocks something. So I'm hoping that it is a nice balance between building out your own castle and also sabotaging other people's castles. I think if the game focuses too much on perfecting your own structure and less on sort of the player interaction in the drafting market, that's where it could fall down for me. But if it's got this nice sort of balance between player interaction and building your own thing, I think it looks really like a neat little thing. So I'm keen to have a look at that in more detail.
Yeah, it definitely has that. Definitely has a table appeal. What's the word?
Yeah,
visual appeal. As you walk, you definitely. It would catch one's attention.
Yeah, well, exactly. I like the idea of sort of building out your own thing and then having this wonky sort of precarious castle on the table in front of you at the end. So hopefully those tiles sort of help realize that concept. I also like how the front of the box looks like a straight castle builder. It's like, oh yeah, you're just building a castle. And then you start playing the game and you're like, oh no, this is like, Alice in Wonderland nonsense.
Very nice. Next one I want to mention is In the Footsteps of Marie Curie, which is a sort of a follow-up to In the Footsteps of Darwin. I believe I have this a bit similarly to the first one you mentioned. I've been struggling to verify that this one is definitely available to buy at Essen. As far as I have seen confirmation, it is, but it isn't available on the app, for example. You can't see it there, so there's a slight question mark over it. But I believe it's going to be available there. I know this is in the honorable mentions list because I know basically nothing about it. I haven't been able to find a rulebook or anything. But I really enjoyed the In the Footsteps of Darwin as we discussed on the most recent podcast episode. I think that the idea of these kind of 30 to 45 minutes, relatively light Euro games exploring the lives of famous scientists through history is a really, really fun idea that really could have quite a lot of legs. It's by a different designer to the previous one. And it does, from simply by judging by its cover, by looking at the board, it does indeed look to be a completely different game, which doesn't share many mechanisms. But it is simply that I enjoyed the first one. I think this could be a very fun, engaging, and meaningful series, and I'm excited to continue its journey. It's going to be from Sorry We Are French, same as the previous one. But yeah, I'm looking forward to giving this one a go. I'll probably just impulse buy this one at Essen.
Very well, I'll be happy to play it with you. Yeah, I was looking up the designer Florian Fay, but unfortunately I haven't played any of their other games.
Nor have I.
Can't really find a good impression for that.
Yeah, it says it's a race game, unlike Darwin, but I have no idea in what sense it is. I do see it seems to have a dice tower sort of thing for cubes, which is fun. But yeah, I'm just kind of excited who if this is successful, who's going to be the third scientist they look into. In the footsteps of Einstein, perhaps.
Yeah.
But yeah.
In the footsteps of Professor Farnsworth.
Well, it says on VGG it's a game featuring resource management, transformation mechanics with a card river and contracts. So, oh yeah, there is a cube tower. Resources distribution, pitch blend uranium and radium is done through a cube tower. But I think it's possibly like Amerigo. Amerigo back in the day had a cube tower.
Yeah, yeah, I've got Amerigo. Well, yeah, but Amerigo didn't distribute resources. It distributed.
Did it?
No,
action.
It was so it had an action rondel, and the tower would distribute cubes associated with the actions, and it would sort of power up the different actions based on what cubes came out. So you'd be sort of more tempted to take different actions based on what the what the cube tower output, which was interesting. A bit like Marrakesh. That's also, it's not cubes, it's cylinders, but anyway. And I will now say something incendiary, comment on my podcast for the sake of the algorithm if you disagree. I like America better than Marrakesh. There we go. For all you felt heads out there, fight me. So I've got what's next. I just realized that my honorable mentions list had been truncated, and there's a lot more on here. I'll keep this next one will be dead short. There is a game that came out a long time ago. I never got to play it, but it has. It's one of those games that I just sort of overlooked at the time. But that's Witness, which is a party game of Chinese whispers, in which you are sort of trying to solve things by whispering in the ears of your friends. And I'm not totally across the rules, but I remember in the early days of Shut Up and Sit Down, they had a review of this, and it got quite a lot of hype from them. So this is sort of one of the games that fits well within the kind of stuff they like back in the days of Paul and Quinn's. Anyway, Witness has remained a sort of cult classic and is getting a reprint this year. So that's exciting. 3 new separate sort of standalone Witness adventures, and I will be excited to go and check those out.
Yeah, that was not on my list, but that's exciting to hear. Did you say there's multiple?
Yeah, there's 3 that I can see. And I don't know if they re-implement the original Witness because I haven't had a chance to play it, or if they are all standalone new adventure stories, but definitely keen to check those out.
Yeah, very cool. I'll add that to my list. The next one I want to mention is actually, I mean, you mentioned at the start that these were the only ones that rulebooks aren't available for. This one does have a rulebook available, I believe, but I have not had time to sufficiently look into it whatsoever. Mike might be able to offer a bit more on it if he has. It's Black Forest, which I think is showing up on a lot of hot lists as well. So it's probably one that our listeners may have seen covered elsewhere. It's Black Forest by Uwe Rosenberg, which reuses an old mechanism from Glass Road, I believe, which is one of the few Rosenbergs I haven't played. So this is why this is on the Arm Mentions list, because I don't really know anything. I can't even draw from my Rosenberg knowledge to offer any insight. I just know that it's a designer I enjoy, and it's an opportunity to get in on a mechanism that apparently is revered that I never really got to experience.
So I do have Glass Road, and I have played it, and I do enjoy it.
It's the wheel. The wheel is the thing that's being talked about from Glass Road.
Yeah, so there's this sort of like in Glass Road, there's this sort of like secret bidding sort of follow mechanism where you've got this hand of like specialist cards, and everyone picks one face down, and then plays it face up, and then they all simultaneously turn them face up, and then everybody else who has a matching specialist, and they all kind of have different functions on them, has to play it from their hand as well. And this can sort of disrupt your plans and the flow of what you'd plan to do. Because you might be looking at your hand of cards.
So it's kind of got a follow. It's got a follow mechanic, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Where you might be building a strategy around the cards in your hand, and then you're forced to play them out of order.
That's interesting. I actually quite like the idea of that, but apparently people found it frustrating.
Yeah, I think it's the kind of thing that appeals to someone like me who's got, a lot of Euro games and, likes these sort of different quirky things. But if you're into the more sort of traditional, optimize your own situation type Euros, this would be a real spanner in the works that I don't think would appeal, which is why I think Glass Road has remained a sort of outlier of Uwe's oeuvre.
I can see myself complaining endlessly about it in the middle of a game whilst enjoying it.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
It's like, Deborah says, I'll get to the end of a movie having complained constantly about it and then go, yeah, it's pretty good.
So apparently this is the thing so Black Forest is a re-implementation where they've taken that out. That's what I understand.
Okay, and that's why it's not really been billed as a re-implementation. Because as I said, it has a co-design this time. It's probably taking, it's obviously not taking all the core ideas. It's obviously taking some of it. Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if they've added a lot of new mechanisms or anything, but
nor do I know.
Yeah, certainly interested in that. I mean, the
back of the box says the wheels are back.
Yeah, and it doesn't mention the specialists at all, to the relief of many.
Well, I'm eager to try it. I do like a Rosenberg, so once again, this will probably just be an ignorant pickup by me, to enjoy later on. See how we get on with it.
Brilliant. Well, I'll definitely be excited to play that.
Excellent.
I've got another short one. It's Ironwood. This is the head-to-head dueling game put out by Mindclash Games. I covered this in earlier episodes of the podcast because I had a chance to play a pre-production copy, and I quite liked it. I'm not going to pick up a copy at Essen. It's a head-to-head 2-player dueling game of area control and card play, and I quite enjoyed it. I think if you are in the market for sort of more vicious 2-player tug-of-war games, if you like the idea of sort of area control and peeps on a map, then this is definitely up your alley. I've got too many of those. I also don't play that many 2-player games. I tend to play games at higher counts, so it just didn't really find room in my collection, but definitely worth checking out if that sounds appealing to you.
Mm-hmm. Very nice.
And you can find out more on an earlier episode of the podcast as well.
I've got an incredibly quick one, which is literally just a mention, just to people aren't aware. Orléans Anniversary Box is available to pre-order and pick up at Essen, which I'm going to be doing, because Orléans is a game which has lots of expansions and it's really good and I really enjoy, but don't own anything from. So I'm in the very lucky position where I can get everything in a deluxe version for a good price. Poor old people like Mike, and I've been in his position with other games, have had to spend lots of money over the years getting all the stuff non-deluxified, and now have to probably feel rather shortchanged, and I've been there. But not with this one. I win with this one. So yeah, I'm excited by that.
I like Orléans, and I've had lots of fun playing it over the years. I don't mind having picked up things individually. I picked up the Plague expansion at Essen last year, and that was great. One thing I am interested in actually is the sort of the approach to the deluxification, because of course it's a bag building game. If you don't know anything about Orléans, it's a bag building action selection game. It's got mostly simultaneous bag building and then turn order sort of action triggering. Once you'll draw meeples, or you'll draw pieces out of a bag, then you'll switch on actions. And that happens simultaneously, and then we take turn order to go around and trigger those actions. And you're largely triggering them to acquire more people, which also lets you advance up an associated track and unlock bonuses, and also move your person around a map of France where they will collect French things like wine and cheese, and build trading posts. But it's a delightful,
just like my French holiday last year.
Exactly. It's definitely, I'd say, the lighter side of middleweight. It's 90 minutes probably. I think it probably felt more complex when it came out, but of course we've gotten a lot more complex in the hobby since then. And it also has a set of building tiles, which is where the complexity of the game really comes in, because you'll set up this sort of marketplace of buildings, and they're all face up, and then they're really consequential. And they start off in the base game being fairly simple, and it will guide you actually to some introductory setups for those building tiles. And then you can introduce more, and eventually, the sort of the Orléans heads will just put out literally every building tile. And You'll just have to sit there and read 30, 40 buildings to try and work out a strategy. There's also a variant for the really experienced players to veto certain buildings right at the start, which I think is their sort of tacit acknowledgement that some of them are just silly broken. I'm looking at you. I think it's the fisherman, the one that makes the sailors wild. It's nonsense. Get rid of it. But
my sailors are now monks.
Yeah, exactly. It's not okay.
I've heard of warrior monks, but sailor monks? Ridiculous.
Well, no, I think there is sort of a, to get into the nitty gritty too much, I think there is a restriction, you can't use them as scholars or something. They can be used as knights or farmers.
A scholar is what I'm calling monks, the yellow ones.
No, you're right about that. Scholars are the ones that go to the university and get you the texts.
Right, okay.
They're the gray ones. But in any case, I've got all of the stuff for Orleans. I don't know if I have every building promo pack. I don't feel compelled to get more buildings. If there's any heads down in the rulebook on Orleans at all, it's because you're trying to work out which promo pack this building came from and what it does. But I played the Plague expansion with Michael. Michael really likes Orleans, and I played the Plague expansion with Michael last Christmas, and it was great. I really, really liked it. And so I'll be interested, but over the years, there have been various deluxifications of Orleans, and most notably the Geek Up bits from Board Game Geek, which replace all the little tokens in the bag with plastic acrylic variants. And not variants, the same thing, but
So the ones in this ones, the Geek Up ones are still discs that are basically acrylic discs. They're essentially the same pieces, but acrylic. These are actually meeples now. Plastic meeples.
Right, so that's the classic DLP.
And meeple's not the right word, actually. They're not meeple shaped, but they're plastic people shapes.
Oh, okay. Okay, so that's slightly different then, because I've got the classic DLP deluxeification, which is wooden meeples that replace the discs.
Oh yeah, no. So these aren't wooden meeples. They're like I don't know how to describe it. They're like they're essentially the characters that are depicted on the cardboard and discs. They're essentially those. They're essentially those, but in and the plastic is in their vague shape, right? And they still have
right.
they still have the art. I suppose they are basic meeples. They're just not Carcassonne meeples.
Well, what you can't do is make them the shapes too distinct, because
I know the shapes are the same. Actually, I misspoke. The shapes are actually the same, but they're big.
So the ones I've got are all the same shape, sort of wooden meeple piece. It's not your traditional Carcassonne meeple.
Yeah, exactly. And then does it also have the person depicted on it? It's not solely the color. Yeah, I think it's the same thing then.
Minor stickers that you have to apply. So hopefully they'll have pre-applied them in the deluxe version.
I think these are already. I saw an unboxing video. I think these are already applied, or they're just lasered on.
Well, that sounds great, and I really like Orleans, so I fully recommend that. If sort of lighter to middleweight Euros, 90 minutes are your thing, I think it plays well at all counts. 2 to 4, I think it is 2 to 5 actually, with an expansion. I think it plays well at all those counts because a lot of it's simultaneous. So yeah, good chance to pick up a classic.
Very good. Do you have any more honorable mentions?
So my next one, actually, I'll call out here is the first Tsar, Ivan the Terrible, designed by Stan Kordinsky and published by Hobby World. This has been demoted. I read the rulebook for this, and it's been demoted to an honorable mention just because I like Rurik, Dawn of Kiev. I've not yet had a chance to play the expansions, which is a shame. This is an old game, which is a shame because I liked the base game, but I felt like it was lacking a bit of meat, right? And this is the sort of, it's sort of area control, but really it's some kind of, Russian historical game. And I mean, maybe it's not actually. It's some kind of, I'm not very good at history or geography, so be kind.
This is somewhere near Russia, somewhere in the past.
Yeah, exactly. And you are effectively a tribe, and you're trying to sort of capture areas on a map with land. But what's sort of the way this kind of works is it's a action selection game at its core, and it's this sort of action bidding thing. So you've got these different workers. that are worth different values, and the actions are all depicted in columns on this board, and you're playing your pieces out into these columns to sort of bid for the most powerful version of that action. And you can hold on to your powerful pieces till later or play them first and things like that. And you can power them up with money, I think. So that it's sort of like mini auctions for each action every round. And that's really compelling. And it kind of falls into that White Castle category of, but you never quite get to sort of fully realize sort of a cool strategy. Like, it's got this cool action selection mechanism, and it's got this cool sort of like argy-bargy on the board. There's no combat or anything like that. So it's not like, it's not like a war game or anything like that. It's definitely sort of like logistics and Euro logistics and trying to parse how valuable the different actions are to you, and whether you want to invest in them. But it just had a lot of promising ideas in it. And then they came out with the expansions, which I picked up at the time, but unfortunately I haven't had a chance to revisit. And I think it's partly because the game itself it doesn't quite get all the way there. And then since then, Stan's done a bunch of games. Most notably for me is Endless Winter, because that's the one I played the most of, which I wasn't a big fan of. So I reread I looked at this sort of with interest, and it, especially seeing as it has a similar sort of setting to Rurik. And again, it's got sort of an action bidding system. It seems slightly different now. Maybe slightly less complex, but it's got similar sort of like, it looks like there's a sort of a distillation of Rurik in a way, because there is a board, you're sort of managing resource sort of collection on the board, like incomes and things, and you're placing meeples, and you can power them up. But in this case, you're just getting like sort of, maybe you're getting a little bonus action. So you can power them up with the coins again. Anyway, I'm interested to check it out. It's been bumped down to an honorable mention just because I couldn't find the sort of, it's definitely not a re-implementation of Rurik, but it's a sort of similar concepts revisited, but it didn't excite me as much as Rurik at the end. I was hoping to find something in the rulebook that made me go, oh, and this is how they've sort of fixed that sort of end game. But, it had that sort of very sort of typical, like, and then we, after 5 rounds, we go to end game scoring, and then that's it. And I was like, okay, well, I'll check this out, because I do want to see how this rule set's been iterated on, but I'm not super optimistic.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen this being mentioned, but I know nothing about it other than everything you just told me, and the vague history and geography I mentioned. Knowledge.
You got another honorable mention?
Yes, I've one more, which again is I think you'll have seen, people will have seen mentioned many times. I think people have possibly already have it and played. I think it has delivered already. It's Inferno.
Oh yeah, this was one I was interested in. Tell me about it.
Well, I mean, I can't tell you a lot about it. That's why it's on the honorable mentions list. But it's by Fernando Eduardo Sanchez, who I believe, what's he done? I believe, no, he hasn't. No, I'm mixing him up with someone else. He has not done something I've played. But it describes itself as a soul management game, but I believe it's essentially, you're basically trying to get people into the correct circles of hell, which is a theme which I believe some people aren't very keen on, but I am. So it obviously draws inspiration from Dante's Inferno, in regards to the depiction of hell. I know that you're basically, so you're trying to, it uses, I know there's a loan system. I do like a Martin Wallace style loan system, and it uses a grid movement, and all, that's basically all I know about it. That it's a game, the theme of which massively appeals to me, and therefore I want to try it out. There is a rulebook available, but I haven't read it.
Fair enough. Well, I will have to have a look at that rulebook, because I glanced at this as well, and I was interested in it. I thought the actual pictures of the game set up looked awful.
Oh, really? I thought it looked great.
On the table. Really? I just thought it looked like a mess of Euro nonsense.
I love a mess of Euro nonsense. What are you talking about?
Its color and presentation is all over the place. it's also a Kickstarter, I think. So it's sort of
Yeah, it was on
got
GameFound, I think.
inconsistent deluxified pieces and stuff like that. And I was just kind of like, ooh, this looks a bit like someone's first game production.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
having
you're right. I think you're right. It is possibly a mess of mechanics in terms of I read the blurb and didn't really have any, and didn't come away really understanding what mechanisms were in play.
well, I'm talking I'm just talking very specifically about the appearance on the table. So I haven't had a chance to explore the mechanisms really, and to be fair, I've got plenty of games that look like a right mess and then
yeah,
play
I mean,
amazingly well.
I know it
So
has worker placement. It has cards which you play, which I think have more than
mhm.
one use. I do like multi-use cards. Um, so it's and yeah, you're right. Maybe I've seen the deluxified pictures, and that's why I thought it looked nice on the table. Something I hadn't considered that possibly it has a deluxified version. Um, but
So I'm keen to I'm keen to go and see it in real life and actually learn more about how the game plays because
yeah,
it's been getting a very positive reception despite any issues I might have with the table presence or the sort of appearance of the game. And I'm certainly not going to let that be a stumbling block to a compelling puzzle or an interesting game. So
excellent.
keen to check out more about Inferno. Oh, this one is one I'll call out because I think this might interest you, actually, and I haven't had a chance to look at it in any detail. Have you heard of Kraftwagen Age of Engineering?
It sounds. Let me look it up because it sounds familiar.
It's got a car on the front. Anyway,
Oh,
this is...
yes, I have a car. Is this? Yeah, hang on. How do you spell it? Kraftwagen. Kraftwagen?
Yeah.
Why
Yeah,
can't
like craft dinner.
Is it two
And
words?
car. Nope.
Is it craft with a K?
Yep.
Yes, here it is. Yes, I have seen this.
Yep, because it's an action rondelle. I like a good action rondelle, and I thought you might be interested in this because it's the designer of Rococo.
Oh, is it? I didn't know that.
Yeah, Matthias Kramer.
Only one of the. But there's two designers of Rococo. The father and son team did Rococo. That's interesting. Did he get rid of his son?
Yes, he's killed his son. No, it's you're thinking of Stefan and Louise Maltz, I think, who are the other credited designers on Rococo.
Quite right. I am. Yes. Okay, but very good. Yes, that does increase my interest. I must admit, it looks a lot. I mean, I looked at this initially and was like, "Oh, this looks a bit like a simpler version of not necessarily mechanically wise, but of Kanban, even down to the way the board is laid out." Obviously, Kanban doesn't have a rondelle.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, it does it's definitely lighter weight than Kanban for sure. But I'll be, Matthias Kramer is quite a well-regarded designer, and so I'll be keen to have a look at this and get some more information about it.
Yes, I shall add this to my watch list. Very nice.
Yeah, I'm a fan of Lancaster as well, which is an earlier design by him. So, and people may also have heard of Watergate and Glenmore Chronicles.
Mm-hmm.
I have not played either though, so I can't really speak to that.
Lovely. Nice artwork too on the box. So I'm gonna chuck this one into honorable mentions because I think a lot of people have probably tired of hearing about it anyway. It's Duel for Middle Earth from Repos, which is a subsidy. No, what's the word? It's a part of the Asmodee family. Yeah, I've looked into this more. It is a reimplementation of Duel. Seven Wonders Duel. By Bruno Cathala and Antoine Bauza, isn't it? I think it is. And it's basically same principle. 3 rounds, drafting, 2-player only, drafting from a central pyramid where you can't draft a card until it's been fully revealed. But instead, there's no point scoring at the end. So Seven Wonders Duel had the war track you could win on, the science you could win with, or if neither of those come to fruition by the end of the game, you added points. There's no points in this one. You have an area control game where you're trying to conquer Middle Earth. You've got the war track equivalent, which is Frodo and Sam trying to get to the Ring to Mordor, and the Ring Wraiths trying to catch them. And then you've got the science, which is equivalent to science, which is the factions, the races, trying to get the allegiance of the races if you're the goodie, or presumably trying to conquer them if you're the baddie. If none of those come to fruition by the end of the game, it's whoever has area controlled the best. But yeah, it looks like it's mostly the same as the minor changes I mentioned, and a really great looking theme and awesome looking artwork. But yeah, so I'm very excited to get that. I'll be picking it up.
Yep, no, that looks really cool. I'm excited about that as well for sure, and I do like Seven Wonders Duel a lot. I have both of the little expansions for it. I don't feel like I've sort of exhausted it, so I don't feel like I need another copy. But then, or in sort of a reiteration, but then they made it Lord of the Rings.
Exactly so, yeah.
And changed it up sufficiently, so I'm keen to look at that in more detail. I'll do. I think the next one has been on a lot of reviewers' hotness lists as well, and that's Saltfjord.
Oh yeah,
which is also, this is a Porta Games, and it's designed by Christian Admundsson Osby and Elif Svensson, and this is a re-implementation of an older game called Santa Maria, which amazingly I still have. I picked that up at the UKG when it came out, and it's a sort of a dice placement game where you're placing dice into rows and columns, and it's quite a compelling puzzle. And it was always quite a fun sort of light Euro for about 2 or 3 months until we realized, we're playing as the conquistadors and we're colonizing South America, and it's not really a great theme.
Fair enough. Yeah, I've seen this appear on quite a few lists as well.
Definitely. So yeah, it's a really light, cute sort of construction game that takes quite a serious subject matter and treats it very lightly, and probably it just suffers from that sort of like, European colonialist lack of self-awareness. So it's really nice that what they've done is they've taken those pleasing mechanisms and rethemed them, so now you are overfishing the Nordic seas.
Yay.
No, they've said it at a time when overfishing wasn't a problem. Don't worry, folks. Right?
Smart.
But so it is. It's again, like one of those things where yeah. Anyway, it definitely looks to be a more sort of a slightly more complex version of the game, but I'm keen to get this one and check it out because I liked Santa Maria, and it's now a game that I'm kind of embarrassed to bring out and suggest. So
that's funny.
This will be a good one. I'm going to mention one more quickly as well, which is Terrorscape. This was a big Kickstarter, and this is one that would make it onto the hype list if it wasn't a one versus many game. But this is a haunted, sort of spooky haunted house, a horror game. One player is the killer and everyone else is the survivors. And it's got that Battleship style setup where you've both got sort of private maps that are mirrored. And the killer is trying to work out what rooms the survivors are in. And as they move around the house trying to accomplish objectives, they make noise. And at the end of the round, they sort of tell the killer where they're hearing noise. And they have to find the survivors and murder them all. So... and it's been getting really good positive reviews, so I like the theme. I find one versus many games generally hard to get to the table, so that's why it sort of hasn't made it into the main list. Just because I like a lot about this, but it does play it too. Which again also makes me nervous because I feel like a one versus many game that functions just as well as a head-to-head game usually means there's not enough for the team of players. If it gets too big, or 3 people doing one person's job. So it'll be interesting to see how that's balanced out. But like I said, it's got positive feedback, so I'll definitely be keen to take a look at this in a bit more detail.
What's it called again?
Terrorscape.
Terrorscape.
Yep. Yeah. And it's designed by Jeffrey CCH.
Oh, I remember this.
And published by Ice Makes.
Is this not out already? I remember this from...
It's a Kickstarter. I think the Kickstarter's delivered to backers.
Gotcha.
But it's available at Essen. So
okay, yeah. I mean, I'd be interested in checking that out as well. I'm the same as you. I agree that one versus many are hard to get to the table, but sometimes they can be great when you do.
Yeah, exactly. I think they're also just hard to balance as well because you want a sweep of sort of player capacities, but then as I say, it's hard to find a balance where 3 people can be doing the same thing as one person, and it's equally satisfying, and you're getting the value out of having 3 as opposed to 1.
The good thing about this, or the potential I see in this, is I know Dead by Daylight got a board game implementation not long ago, and I was tempted to back it, but I just didn't. I felt it was being held back slightly too much by its requirement to adhere to its source material. Sure. So I think this is kind of a very similar thing, right? But free of those shackles.
Yeah, fair enough. I've heard that the Dead by Daylight board game's getting quite positive reception. So I'll be interested to look at that as well when and if it delivers. I didn't back it either. We can move on into the sort of slightly more deep dives. You say you've got 4?
No, I have 3 now.
Right, 3 now. Is Ada's Dream one of them?
It is not.
Right. So then this will sort of saddle the line between honorable mentions and deep dives, because I know you backed it, right?
I did.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be available at Essen. At least Alley Cat have said it will be.
To play, not to buy, I believe.
Oh, it's on the buy list.
Oh, okay, maybe.
I don't know when it's delivering to backers.
That's strange if they're selling it before. I don't really care. I got too many games to play. But it's still strange. I imagine some people won't be very happy about that.
Yeah, this is definitely a thing that's sort of come up. And the way I've seen publishers handle it recently is they'll send out an email survey to backers and say, do you mind if we sell this at this convention? And
then ignore, and then regardless of what people say, do it anyway.
Well, I was going to say, I've seen those feedback forms where I've been a backer come back almost unanimously with people saying, yeah, it's cool to sell. So either we've got the wrong impression and people value the sort of early access exclusivity of being a Kickstarter backer less than the impression we've got, or publishers tend to just ignore the actual feedback and lie about the results, which is pretty simple.
Oh, yes, so I have an update from a few days ago. I actually remember reading this. It doesn't look like it's available for sale. They intended for it to be available to collect for backers at Essen, but it looks like they haven't managed to do that. Instead, they're going to be handing out promos, and they're going to be demoing the game, but it doesn't look like it's going to be available for collection or for purchase.
Great. Well, then, what we'll do is we'll take this section and we'll kick it down the road. When you've got your copy and you've had a chance to play it, come back on the podcast, we'll discuss it, because I played it on TTS with the patrons.
Yes,
but
indeed.
We'll hold off on that for now. I'd rather not start talking about it on the podcast when you've got your copy coming imminently and we can't even buy it anyway.
Yes, indeed.
So moving straight on then into, do you want to do one?
I'm more than happy to start.
Yep.
I've got kind of 3 weights, I would say. I've tried to even out, and I'll go for let's start easy. Go for my lightweight game. This is a game called Panda Spin.
That sounds lightweight.
It sounds like what? It sounds lightweight.
Sounds lightweight.
Well, it's trick taking, so inherently is not lightweight. Well, it is. It's inherently going to have some depth to it.
Directly proportional to your familiarity with trick taking.
Yes, well said. So this is by Karl Chudik, a designer I'm not familiar with. He did Red 7 actually. I played Red 7.
Very familiar with Karl Chudik. He also did Innovation and Glory to Rome.
But I haven't played either of those games. Hence my lack of familiarity.
And he did, what was the one I played recently from him about the islands that was just weird? Aegean Sea. Yeah, we talked about that in an earlier podcast. So.
Oh, and did you like it?
No.
Oh dear.
Not really.
Oh dear.
I didn't hate it. It was quite inscrutable, which is honestly the case for a lot of his games.
I'm not super keen on Red 7, which is the only game of his I've played. To be honest, it's
I think
okay.
Barry likes that.
Does he?
But we talked about that when we talked about a JNC, actually.
That makes sense.
Barry quite liked it. But
Panda Spin,
I haven't played that one.
Panda Spin is essentially a trick-taking game in the vein of... So it kind of reminds me a little bit... I haven't played it, but I've read the rules. It reminds me a little bit of Scout in some ways. It reminds me a little bit of Odin, which is a card game that I've played quite recently on BGG. I'm trying to remember... Sorry, on BGA, I should say. I remember who that's by. Have you played Odin? It's by Johan Go, Hope S. Huang, and Gary Kim, and published by Crocotame. Oh, I thought it was published by someone else. Anyway, it's basically It's a trick-taking game where you are trying to get rid of all your cards as quick as possible so that you can then score points equal to the cards left in the hand of the player who still has the most cards left. Does that make sense?
Right.
It was a very odd sentence. I wasn't sure if I said it correctly. And a round continues until everyone but one player has that cards. And so the round, at the end of a round, the first round, someone will have no points, but everyone else will have at least some level of points. And it's first to 15 points wins. When you win a trick, you get to discard all your cards. Obviously, that's a good thing, given that you're trying to get rid of all your cards. But when you don't win a trick, you take the cards back into your hand and you spin them around, and they become better. And when I say they become better, some cards, it could be the case that a 6 actually becomes a pair of 9s, for example. They don't just become slightly better; they become potentially a lot better. However, if you play, it's not trick taking in the sense that you follow suit. You have to follow, I don't know what the word would be, type. So if someone leads with a singleton, you have to follow it with singletons, and you can always bomb, obviously, a bit like teach you in that sense. Or if you play a run, you have to then everyone else has to follow with a run. Again, you can always bomb. But however, the cards do have suits, and the suits do their own. So it's based on the Chinese zodiacs, and also it's based on the 5 elements of Chinese, I guess, folklore. I'm not familiar with it, so I don't want to misspeak. But there's 5 elements. Everyone starts off with an element, and the element cards are actually the element cards are cards where you win the trick if a certain criteria has been fulfilled. So I don't know. I can't remember what they are. I might find an example. Let me see if I have an example here. For example, the water element card. You may only play the water card if the highest bid has at least 3 values, same or different. So if the criteria on your element card is true, you may play it and basically just nuke the trick and win it. You can, as I said, you can also bomb. However, for example, you cannot ever use water cards in a bomb. So as I said, they do have suits which are according to these elements. I can't remember what the suits do in particular. I have them here. As I said, water can't be used in a bomb. For each fire symbol you play allows you to discard a card from your hand. So basically, as you can see, there's other stuff going on in terms of these elements. But the core trick taking is basically a teach you style trick taking game. And then the thing I think that could be quite enjoyable is potentially I can see there being great depth in deliberately losing tricks or trying to lose tricks early on in order to flip cards around to make potentially make bombs or to make powerful sets that you can play and try to and lock people out with and just not run a suit because that's not how suits work, but the equivalent of running a suit in Bridge. And yeah, it just seems like one. I always enjoy getting these kinds of games, which are kind of light, fairly light, but have a high level of depth. I enjoy trick taking games mostly. It really appeals to me. I really like the idea of spinning the cards into more powerful cards. Winning and losing at the right times. The element cards where you can potentially nuke a trick with the right if you can manipulate it correctly. It all seems very nice. It seems really appealing.
Well, that sounds interesting, and Carl Chudik is a well sort of experienced card game designer, so I'm definitely keen to have a look at that in more detail.
Excellent. Yeah, so Panda Spin. I was hoping to pre-order it, but I couldn't work out how to do it, so I'll go to Matago and see if I can pick up a copy.
Is it a Matago publication?
It is a Matago, yes, sorry.
There's a few bits and pieces I want from Matago as well, so we'll definitely have to swing by
make a stop
Matago and check it out. Yeah.
Lovely.
All right. So the first one I've got here for slightly more detailed discussion is Steam Power. It was a Martin Wallace game from Wallace Designs that was on GameFound. I didn't back it. So I've got a more detailed deep dive into it. It's potentially really interesting to me. But also, I didn't back it for a reason, and I'm concerned that it might not sort of achieve what I want from it. It's so, of course, Martin Wallace, very well-known designer. This game is tiles and trains in the vein of Age of Steam, which he was a co-designer on, and Railways of the World. Steam Power, which is a lighter affair than either of those other two games. I really like Railways of the World, which is functionally a sort of economic management, area control, pick up and deliver game. And so the first sort of phase of that game is building railways onto a hex map, and then you're connecting up cities. And then the latter part of the game is either manically trying to build railways because you messed up the first part, or it's delivering goods from cities along your tracks and using other people's tracks as well and generating income and points for everyone. And One of the nice things about Railways of the World is that it's got this sort of points and income track, which is the same. It's not like Brass. It is where it's two tracks that are just printed together. This one has your points and your money are intrinsically linked. So as you earn points early on, you'll increase your income, but then you hit a tipping point about midway through. And as you continue to increase your score, your income starts to go back down. And so you'll have less money and be less able to do things. And so sort of managing this points and income is really important to railways. And it is completely absent from Steam Power, which sort of gives me a bit of hesitation. What Steam Power models is the same exact railway building function. So you've got these hexagonal rails and you've got these little trains and you're building them on this board and you're connecting up cities in order to score points. But instead of pivoting to this pick up and deliver thing, that's all being changed because in railways, every city has a want and an output. So it puts out certain cubes of a color and wants cubes of a different color. And so you transport, and sometimes they want the same cubes actually, but they can't make do with their own cubes. I don't know why. They want other people's purple cubes. Don't worry about it. But in Steam Power, what you've got is this secret hand of contracts. And so each of the contracts wants, and I think this is probably going to be cubes in the retail edition. In the deluxe edition, it's stackable crates. But each city is going to put out these colored pieces, and each contract wants certain colored pieces. And you don't have to transport them anywhere. Instead, you need to be able to take them from cities that have been sort of activated by factories. And whenever someone completes a contract using cube, so in order to activate a city, you kind of have to meet two criteria. It needs to be connected to any player's railway, and then you can build a factory there, and then that turns on the city and it starts to make these cubes. And then you can complete a contract using those cubes. But if you take from a city with another player's factory in, then they get a point as well. And it's a race to sort of complete the most contracts before, and the game end is triggered when somebody completes a certain number of those. And so you're trying to complete the most contracts and earn the most points before someone else manages to do the same. So you have to be mindful of who you're giving points away to. Is it your closest competitor? You want to give it to someone who's lagging behind, which is a nice sort of way of taking the catch-up mechanism and giving it to player agency. I really like that. There's a lot I like here. However, all of the money in the game, which you need to build the railways, comes from either the completion of contracts or an action to just take 3 coins. So there's also this system and I'm comparing it to railways because it really does feel kind of like a distillation of Railways of the World. In that there's a lot of overlapping sort of mechanisms, and I imagine the feel will be quite similar. But it also, and people will have played that, that's a 20-year-old game. In Railways, there's also this concept of loans. So, good old-fashioned Martin Wallace loans, which I'm pretty sure you can't pay off, and you just have to keep paying for. Maybe you can't pay them off. I can't remember exactly how it works in Railways. But there's no loans in this. It's just sort of skip a turn to get three coins. because you get 2 actions on your turn, and 1 action is take 3 money. And I'm not sure how I feel about that. I feel like maybe it's because the game is sort of supposed to be able to access these same kind of mechanisms, but just sort of a simplified version. But I feel a bit like the hidden contracts and the sort of take some money will lead to sort of a less strategic, less interesting game. But it will be quicker. Railways is long. Age of Steam is even longer. So it depends. There's so much Railways. You can play all day Railways, in which case it is longer than Age of Steam. Depends what map you do and your player count. Anyway, point of the story, I'm definitely keen to look at this in more detail. I wasn't so excited about it to back it on GameFound, so I definitely want to sort of go and check it out at the booth and see how it looks.
Yeah, well, it's not a Martin Wallace game without loans, so that's a hard pass.
No loans, I'm out. All right, so that's my first slightly more deep dive.
Very nice, yeah. We'll have to swing by and check that out. So I'm going to move on to... Which one shall we move on to? We'll move on to what I think is probably the heaviest of my 3, which I think people may have seen on some other lists. Actually, you know what? I don't think I have seen this on many people's lists, if anybody's actually. Which is It's Unconscious Mind. By Laskus, Johnny Pack, Yoma, and Antonio Zacks, lots of designers. Published by Fantasia Games. This apparently was being demoed at Essen last year. I don't know if you saw it. I don't remember seeing it there.
No, I don't remember seeing it there.
But I spoke to someone.
This was on crowdfunding a number of years ago.
Yeah, I mentioned it to somebody the other day, and they said that they thought it had come out last year. I was like, I don't think so. They said that they thought they demoed it. So maybe they're wrong, but I heard it was being demoed last year.
I don't think backers have it yet.
No, exactly. I know Paul put out a how to play video in the last few days.
So I think it's probably in the midst of delivery.
I think so, yeah, and it is available to buy at Essen, and I'm quite excited by it for a number of reasons. We spoke about it slightly before we began recording, very briefly, and Mike described it as which I think, and accurately so, as I forgot what you said now. But it was a secret
interlocking series of Euro minigames.
Yes, minigames, that was it. Which I don't think is entirely unfair. But I often find interlocking Euro minigames quite compelling. So this is set. So first and foremost, the reason this grabbed my attention was the theme of it. Unconscious Mind sees you as contemporaries of Sigmund Freud, in Vienna, trying to navigate the newly found field the newly invented field, I guess, of psychoanalysis to treat patients from their mental woes, I guess. People who know me may know that Deborah, my partner, studied psychoanalysis in university. She's a great fan of Freud. We went to his house actually in Vienna last year, on her birthday, I think, which was really fun. So it's a theme that she will massively. She'll be all over this theme, which makes it easy to get to the table. I am interested in it by proxy. And I always really enjoy games that I have some kind of real life connection to, even just the fact that I've been to the house. This just is fun for me. And then so that's what drew me to it. The thing that then the thing that drew me further in was the presentation of it. I really enjoyed the implementation of the theme, such as a depiction of Vienna. Some of the places that your meeples walk around are like coffee shops in Vienna, like I don't know if they're named necessarily, but what's it called? Cafe Sacca, is that what it's called? A Sacca Hotel, maybe it is, where the famous Sacca torta is from. The whole coffee and cake culture of Vienna feels like it feels like it comes off the board for me, which I really like. The artwork itself is beautiful. I really like the use of the cards somewhat in the style of Canvas. Do you remember that? The board game Canvas, where putting those layering those transparent cards on each other to make artwork. It was a wonderful idea there. They have a similar thing here where the characters, I think it's called grief, but their mental health conditions anyway are represented by these transparent cards which layer over them, and they kind of represent. And I know some of them were like, I know, maybe bugs or something, or crawling on them to represent their anxiety or something. I really enjoy the way that this visually depicts the mental health issues.
Well, and it's worth noting that the art of the game is credited, to Andrew Bosley, who is well known for at least a lot of the art on the cards you're describing, the sort of emotional cards. I'm not totally au fait with the mechanisms, but you can see where the sort of different artists have contributed, because Andrew Bosley, well known for Everdell, which has got, wonderful art and people love that. And then the actual sort of more real world, the characters and the board and things like that is Vincent Dutray, who's also very well regarded. So it's, two of the hottest artists in board games right now.
Yeah, I mean, there's a deck of cards that look like they're straight from Dixit, is what I mean as well. Yeah. There's a menagerie, which is obviously not the right word, but it's the word I'm going to use. There's a menagerie of different art styles for different things, which all work well. Plethora is probably the word I should have gone with, but I'm sticking with menagerie.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's characters. So the patients are people like and one of the ones we noticed was Franz Kafka, for example, is one of the patients. I don't know if all the patients are going to be real people or if they're all going to be contemporaries of Freud. As far as I know, Franz Kafka was never treated by Freud. But in one of the pictures has Kafka as a patient, and the grief layer he has over him has bugs on him, which is amusing for anyone who has read Kafka's Metamorphosis. So lots of awesome, fun, and well implemented themes. Incredible looking artwork, as Mike pointed out, from a great assortment of different artists who have all seem to have had their unique takes and unique skills in the craft implemented appropriately and differently. But then mechanically, as Mike said, it's sort of a host of these mini games. It uses, I think it's primarily worker placement. I think I would describe it as primarily worker placement, because each turn you're putting down your I can't remember what they're called, but the speech bubble workers to point at different actions, and you can't do the same action again until you've rested and cleared all your actions away. But there's this interesting additional layer where you depend. I can't remember what it is that depicts it, but depending on what action you pick, or maybe it's the direction of the speech bubble, you also move your ink blot around your board, which gives you additional bonus actions, or can enable you to treat your patients. So there's this kind of worker placement on worker placement almost. Layer. You're right. It is layers. Layers of mini games. There's there's obviously there's resource management, both in terms of the I can't remember what they're called. How familiar are you with this game? Do you know the disc with the three different aspects of
Is it the insight dice?
Insight, thank you. Yes, the insight. So you've got the three different types of insight. You've got minor, medium, and major of different. I think again, I can't remember their categories. One of them's passion, and then you spend those to treat your patients. I can't remember what there's a thing called heart-shaped boxes in it, which are used to treat the patients. The resource, and I have absolutely no idea what that's referring to. And I asked Deborah, and she says she doesn't understand what that is either. So it possibly is a very deep cut reference to some Freudian thing, but I'm not.
Heart-shaped box markers, yeah.
Yeah, I don't.
I like
know
how
what those
they're
are.
in the same category as coffee markers.
Yeah, Deborah speculates that the coffee is a family-friendly replacement for opium.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Because the coffee is
I'd like
essentially
the opium edition, please.
the coffee is essentially it's that kind of that ethereal resource that's kind of used for like bonus actions, like in between. Like spend a coffee to upgrade a no, to transfer oh my god, I forgot, insight, like change an insight from one to another or something. And you can do it in the middle of any time, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
For example,
that could have been a Kickstarter add-on for
the opium version.
Marcus. Yeah.
I mean, in fairness, it's a clever, like I said, like I mentioned earlier on, Vienna is the city of coffee and cake culture, right? So coffee was a perfectly sensible substitute, I feel.
Well, there is also major, I mean, and this is not the same, but there's major issues with printing stuff that involves opium in China.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Well, because the opium trade had such a negative connotation for them.
This is not a part of history I'm familiar with.
Oh, it was the way that the England got into controlling the Chinese back in the imperial days, wasn't it?
I didn't.
They opened up the opium trade in India. From India to China, and used it to manipulate the Chinese.
But yeah, so it's got worker placement. It's got card drafting. It's got resource management. Like I said, the core worker placement mechanism also involves potentially getting to take bonus actions, which are bonus actions that you can construct by moving your ink blot around, and you can manipulate what those bonus actions will be over the course of the game. It's got another mechanism I really enjoyed, which was the I think it was an optional oh my god, words module, where you're publishing theories, and then your opponents can also utilize those theories, and you score points from them, but they can like piggyback off of you, and you get points for that. So it's a good marriage of theme and mechanisms, where you can use a peer's writings to stand on the shoulders of giants, so to speak, which works particularly well with the whole theme that you are not Freud. You're not trying to beat Freud. The theme of the game is built around the fact that Freud is going to be better than all of you, but you're trying to be his most accomplished contemporary.
Well, that makes sense, I guess.
Yeah, well, some of these games, like the Sherlock Holmes games, try to have you beating Sherlock Holmes, and then one can never do it.
No, you can't.
Exactly.
I mean, again, that's like trying to get. Yeah, you can never do it.
He just always in Sherlock Holmes Consultant Detective, he just instinctively knows every location he should go to and in what order. Incredible.
He's Sherlock Holmes.
But yeah, the game ends when Freud's marker reaches the end of a track, and then everyone gets one more round. You play one more round. And yeah, it just seems like it's a theme I enjoy. The theme seems brilliantly implemented. It looks fantastic. The visual pleasure one would get from this, to me, is off the scale. And it's a bunch of mechanisms that I enjoy, which seem to be layered and interlaced in ways that I also enjoy, and then with sufficient alteration or sufficient unique flavor, such as I said, the worker placement having multiple impacts. It just seems like it's that level. It's that kind of entry point into a game that I've kind of mentioned many times on the show, which is it doesn't seem to do anything particularly new, but it blends things together into a melting pot in a new way, in a way that will make something unique, which I'm going to really enjoy, I think.
Yeah, and I've not played Unconscious Mind. I would be keen to give it a try. I didn't back it purely off the back of Endless Winter, which might not be a fair comparison. But to your point about the sort of the presentation, this is the publisher Fantasia, and they've not done too many games really. They've only got sort of, to my mind, 4 sort of major titles, 3 of which haven't really come out yet. So it's really just Endless Winter Paleo Americans, which was a big Kickstarter with a bunch of designers, and it came in sort of a big sort of Euro box in the end. And I backed that and I played it a number of times, and it didn't really land. And in terms of the actual gameplay mechanisms, the production itself, absolutely gorgeous, like sort of unimpeachable. So in terms of the production here, I would expect it to be gorgeous and very pleasing in the same way Paleo Americans was. The only designer in common on Endless Winter and Paleo Americans and Unconscious Mind is Johnny Pack, who, again, I haven't got too much experience with. Pack did a game called Hangtown a long time ago, which I played once and enjoyed a lot. And then that was sort of reimagined as Coloma, which I didn't get a chance to play. And I know that they've worked on a lot of other sort of mini expansions and things like that. But Endless Winter itself, obviously, Stan Kordunsky was a credited designer on that. There was a number of other credited designers, much like this, which has 4 credited designers. Unfortunately, I don't really know the other. I mean, I've sort of seen games from the other 3. I haven't really played them, which, includes Antonio Zacks, who is credited with Gomorrah Downtown and Oath to Embers, which actually, to be fair, Oath to Embers isn't even out yet, so I don't know. And then the other 2 designers are actually, one is Yoma, who's the art director of this as well, and worked on the art for Endless Winter. So clearly a sort of accomplished artist, but did a game called Flow, which is been on Kickstarter but isn't out yet. And that's it. And then the other designer is, bear with me here, Laskus, who I think might actually be the original concept. Don't quote me on that, but this is their only design.
Yeah, exactly.
So it wouldn't surprise me if they sort of brought this to Fantasia, and then Fantasia brought in some of their other sort of people they've worked with before to help develop this. So, any comparisons to Endless Winter certainly take with a pinch of salt, but I got the impression looking at it that it had a lot of sort of similarities in terms of these sort of Euro mini games, interlocking Euro mini games, which is actually a staple of Johnny Pack's design credentials more than anyone else that worked on Endless Winter, as far as I can tell. So I was sort of hesitant about this. And, the theme is really cool and well realized, but it's not really a theme that resonates with me particularly. So I definitely am keen to give it a try, and I'd certainly be interested in picking up a copy if, it sort of comes together well. Obviously, there's some new designers in there as well, so I'm keen to see sort of what they've brought to the table. So I'm definitely excited to check this one out. And of course, it always helps when you've got a great production and brilliant artists on board as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Okie dokie. So my next sort of deeper dive is actually, it's probably not even as deep a dive really as it should be. So I'll keep it fairly brief, which is Concilium Urbis. And this is from Perro Loco Games, designed by Jorge Barosa and Jesus Fuentes. So that's coming out from Perro Loco Games, who also released Satori, which was a Euro game I picked up last year. Different designers. Satori was not something that sort of remained on the table. Sort of interesting Euro design, but not really anything majorly distinct about it, unfortunately. Aside from the pleasant art by Edu Valls. But this one it looks a bit like Cascadia with auctions. So what you're doing is you're drafting tiles, just like in Cascadia. Sorry, not Cascadia. Harmonies. It looks like Harmonies with auctions. So you've got this player board where you're going to be placing tiles, and you get a hand of 4 tiles, and you're building some kind of urban city, and I think it's got more going on than, say, these typical geometric puzzles like Cascadia or Harmonies or Calico, where you're sort of generating resources or something like that. But you get a hand of 4 tiles to put into this grid, and they also have some kind of stacking functionality as well and things like that. But you're going to keep 2 of the tiles you get and pass 2 either to your right or left, depending on what a card somewhere in the game says. But you're getting 2, and then once you've got all 4, the 2 you kept and the 2 you've been passed, you will then place them into your grid. And then there is a set of scoring cards that will be auctioned off. So you've got some crystals that you're getting out of the game, and you're bidding whether to implement what are called laws. But they're in-game scoring cards that will overwrite existing in-game scoring cards. So, at its worst, it's going to be a frustrating game where you can't really build into any long-term strategy because you don't know if it's going to be overridden. At its best, it's going to be this sort of cool, like tactical game where you're playing this sort of geometric puzzle, but you've got to sort of hedge your bets on which way these scoring conditions are going to come out and choose carefully what you want to commit to and bid on. So I thought it looked really interesting anyway, and it seemed like it was doing something a bit different. So I'm keen to look at that in a bit more detail.
Oh yeah, this wasn't on my radar at all. Hadn't heard of it. But yeah, I'll definitely come have a look at it with you. Not sure if it's necessarily my type of thing at first glance, but that's very much a first glance thing.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely has a sort of appearance of like quite bombastic art. But it also, it's just we've been playing sort of quite a lot of harmonies lately, and it's definitely heavier than that, I think. It's got quite a lot more complexity to the rule book and things like that. But as a sort of a way of taking that sort of genre and developing it, they've certainly seemed to have gone in a direction that involves more player interaction. So that's why I'm interested in looking at it in more detail.
Cool. Very good.
So what's your last sort of deep dive here?
Well, I think you know what it is. Or
do I?
Sorry, were you being the audience?
Oh, yes, no, I do know what it is, actually. Oh my god. Let's save this one to last as well, because this is also like my most hype game.
Oh, really? Wow, okay. Cool.
Yeah,
exciting.
So let's do my... Well, and this one I've sort of, I know that you would have put it on anyway.
Yeah.
But I've let you take this one because you actually had a chance to play it.
Well, that's fine. My Duel for Middle Earth would have happily sat in my most anticipated games as well. Which I and as I said, I'd read the rules for that, so that's fine. We'll share the last one after you do one more. We'll share the last one, eh?
Yeah. So my next one is Beyond the Horizon, which is the follow-up to Beyond the Sun, and that was Beyond the Sun is a space technology sort of area control game designed by Dennis K. Chan. This one is Beyond the Horizon. They've brought in Adam Hill, Ben Pitchback, and Matt Riddle. So I don't know how much of this is actually designed by Dennis Chan and how much of it is sort of a reimplementation of their original design with new designers. But this is put out by Cranio Creations, a publisher who I've got mixed feelings about. But, at least the publications tend to be sort of generally quite solid. And when it comes to their retail releases, fine publications. In terms of sort of art and presentation and production. It's never anything like sort of to write home about, but it's always functional and just fine. It's the Kickstarter ones that tend to be a little bit more questionable. But I'm a big fan of Beyond the Sun. I really, really like it. I'm terrible at it. I don't think I've ever won it, but I really, really like it. And so this is a sort of re-implementation of the same core designs, but now it's a sort of civilization building game. So instead of setting off into space and colonizing planets and developing sci-fi technology, you're developing more real-world technologies and you're exploring a planet, Earth, and you're sort of colonizing on Earth. And I'm really excited to check this out. I read the rule book. I'm not yet convinced that it's going to replace Beyond the Sun. The core conceit of Beyond the Sun, one would argue, is the tech tree. And anyone who's got the actual board game and plays the actual board game, because it was on BGA, and a lot of people played it there, if you've got the actual board game, there is a variant that is considered a sort of a must-play variant, which is the technology draft. So when you unveil a new technology, because it really is all about this tech tree, and resource management, but it's all about the tech tree and getting in on those techs. And you're either following what other people have already discovered or leading the way and choosing what technologies are going to be inserted into the tech tree. And in the core rules, it says draw 2 cards and pick one to insert into the tech tree. The advanced variant, which I think is actually intended to take over this core conceit, it implements a sort of a market row that people will take techs from and then put them into the tree, and then the row will sort of refresh. So there's a little bit more scope for planning, provided you get into the tree first and are able to implement those. And I think that really sort of brings that tech tree planning to the next level. Like it makes the game more strategic in a way that only benefits it. I really like that part of it. So I'm really keen to see how they've done that. It seems like that part of the game has remained largely the same, but I couldn't get... it looks like that variant is gone. I couldn't find it in the rulebook, so I'm a little concerned that they've just gone with the pick 2 cards and put one out, which would be a shame. So we'll see how that's happened. But the other big change is that now the colonization of planets is gone. So before it was sort of an area control thing where you would amass ships on a planet, and then whoever had the most ships would have a right to colonize the planet, and you'd claim the card. That would go into your tableau, and a new card would come out. Now you've got these hexagonal tiles that are sort of being explored and revealed. So you're building out a map, and then you can build settlements and cities on this map. So there's less of a sort of holistic claim to tiles, and there's a sort of helpful or sort of a symbiosis between adjacent tiles where you might give some points to people who are next to you. And so that's interesting for sure. The other thing they've done, which is just a sort of an observation of components, but Beyond the Sun was always a bit more expensive than a game of its weight wanted to be, because it had so many dice in it. You never throw the dice. They're just counters that tick over. But they were very functional. Unfortunately, there was a lot of them, and so the game was quite expensive as a result. They've replaced all of that now with little cardboard counters that you sit on top of pawns. And while that might make the game more affordable, it will also probably be a bit less functional and a little bit more fussy. So
that's a pity.
We'll have to see. It is a pity, but on the other hand, I think with Beyond the Sun, like the price point was off-putting for people. So, so I'm just keen to sort of see what's going on here. I like civ building. I don't necessarily like it more or less than space. I like both a lot. So it's not really a thematic choice for me. It's just that I like this other game. I'm keen to see how they've reiterated on it and changed things up.
Yeah, well, I haven't played Beyond the Sun, but you've intrigued me enough. Hopefully we can find time. We might not be able to find time at Essen to play this because it looks quite long.
It's not too bad, actually. Beyond the Sun is a solid sort of like 2-hour game, but I would be very surprised if it went on much longer.
Okay, well, maybe we can get it done one of the evenings then.
I would expect it to be less than 2 hours, really.
Okay.
So it's definitely, and that's what I mean. Like it's sort of a £60 game, but that's largely because £60 British pounds. But that's largely because of all the dice. It really is a very sort of solidly middleweight euro. Okay. It's not super heavy. The rulebook was also quite bad, so it was kind of more difficult to access than it deserved to be.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, it's a good solid sort of middleweight title, and I'm just sort of keen to see. I don't really know what I want from Beyond the Horizon.
It looks and feels heavier than middleweight.
Yeah, so I wonder if they've added weight, which I don't know if it necessarily wants. Mm-hmm. The other problem with Beyond the Sun was it was an absolute hog for table space, and the actual tech tree board, where the sort of actions that you take on your turn it's massive, and it's kind of got some usability issues because you kind of want to be across all of the text on that board and reading them and seeing them, because they reveal sort of places, actions you can take and things like that. But it also means that you're very far from, you're either like, you've really got a good view of all the text or a good view of the sort of area control board, which is much smaller. and sits off to the side. But it's hard to see all things at once. So it kind of becomes like sort of a standing and looming kind of game, unfortunately. So I don't know if they will have been able to fix that. I doubt it, because they seem to have replaced the area control board with a hexagonal expanding map. But maybe they just didn't bother to try, because it's not something that's necessarily easy to do.
No, losing battle.
Or sorry, not necessarily has an obvious fix.
All right.
But it's good enough that I'm willing to overlook these criticisms, because I really enjoy the game, and I've not seen sort of a communal developing tech tree come out in a game that's been as compelling.
Well, then the climax then, I guess. Apparently Mike's hottest, most anticipated game.
Yeah, so don't tell me it's bad, Chris, because you all seem to enjoy it.
We did, yes. So myself and Michael managed to play this at UKG, and Mike was unfortunately otherwise occupied.
Yeah, I had meetings. I was bummed out.
Yeah, and we were like, no, those meetings look boring, Mike. We're gonna go play this fun game. And that fun game is Altay, Dawn of Civilization, by Ares, coming from Ares Games. Designed by Paolo Mori and Ole Steinnes, whose name I enormously enjoy, because there is a chain called Ole and Steen in the UK. And his name is basically that entire coffee shop name. And it's a great coffee shop, and I recommend their cinnamon rolls. So Paolo Mori is Ethnos fame, isn't he?
Yeah, no, Paolo Mori is Ethnos, and also Dogs of War, which was a sort of beloved but now horribly out of print Simon game. Also Blitzkrieg, World War II in 20 minutes. And
Ole Steinnes has quite a repertoire, but nothing I've played that I don't think. Oh, Champions of Midgard.
Oh yes, that's right. That's what I was thinking of. I was like, I've definitely played something. Yeah, Champions of Midgard, which we played on the show a long time ago. And Meeples and Monsters, which I haven't played. That was a more recent release. Oh, yeah, okay. So I have, Champions of Midgard's good.
But so it's got good design chops behind this game. Coming from Ares Games, we have, as I said, myself and Michael have played it. We massively enjoyed it. Well, I can't speak for Michael, but I believe he really enjoyed it as well. Deborah played it with us as well. She really enjoyed it. She's excited about it. She wanted me to get it, which I will. It is a deck building game and an area control game, I guess I would describe it as. Definitely fundamentally a deck building game. The area control is it's very, very important, very central to the game. Don't get me wrong. I would still describe it, however, as secondary to deck building, because it more facilitates resource generation and some of the points scoring opportunities. There's very direct player interaction insofar as I said, there's area control, and you literally have to fight each other. On your turn, you have to play a card that initiates a fight, and then you have to defeat the opponent in combat to remove their settlements. And then once you've completely removed all their settlements, then if you have the right card, you can potentially build a settlement in the zone that they were in. It's very much definitely not one if you don't like direct player conflict. There was definitely not much table politics in the game we played, but there was definitely an element of, and I very much did try to stay fairly even. I tried not to bully someone too much. So there's definitely the fact that was on my mind means there's definitely an element of I'd be wary of this if you're someone who does shy away from games where you have to make. Actually, funnily enough, Michael probably might have. He didn't seem to struggle with it, but he's not particularly keen on having to decide to attack this person over this person, right?
Yeah.
I had the most, I believe. So there's asynchronous races. I think I was the orcs. I believe I was, who are the most fighty. Your 10 deck card starting deck is going to be slightly different. So I think I had the most fighting ability. So that, I guess the onus therefore was on me to do that. And I basically couldn't. I don't think I attacked Michael the entire game because we were on opposite corners of the board, and the other two players I attacked, I think, pretty evenly. You get points for destroying enemy settlements. You also get points just for obviously for buying better cards from the deck building aspect. Some of the cards will have inherent points in them. You also get points just for having settlements, for having a region. I don't know what they call it, a territory with at least one settlement. So that's why so both fighting and expanding, both two of the X's are directly giving you points, and then I guess buying new cards, improving your deck is also sort of one of the X's. And then you also get points. There's technologies you can purchase, and achievements rather. And the highest level of those are called wonders, and they're also unique scoring opportunities. So I don't know. I can't think about any, but maybe score 3 points for every yellow territory you have, or score 2 points for every card of this subtype that you have in your deck at the end of the game. That kind of thing, right? And it plays incredibly. Obviously, it's deck builder, so it kind of inherently plays relatively quickly insofar as you're already getting your turn ready to go during everyone else's turns. But it is very quick. Some of the cards generate resources, which then you can use to either build new settlements or get the achievements cards, the wonder cards. You can also use to buy your new cards. Obviously, it has a system in play where you lose all your resources at the end of every turn, just like you do any deck builder I can think of. But if you have 2 wood, for example, that you cannot spend or do not wish to spend, you get 2 coins, and every 5 coins you have, you can trade in for a wild resource at a later date. So it's very suboptimal, obviously, to not spend all your resources, but there is a little bit of there's a mechanism in there which helps you out a little bit. The way the combat works is if you lose the combat as a defender, then you replace any cards that you spent. So the cards to add 1 to your attack, or add 2 to your attack, or to defend or defense, those do come from your hand. So they do. So you might think, oh, I'm kind of nerfing my next turn by defending, but no, you will get to replace those cards. If you think it's a losing battle, you're definitely not going to be able to win it. You can simply surrender, declare that you lose, and then you can discard any number of cards from your hand whatsoever, not just defense cards, not just attack cards. You can just discard your entire hand if you have a duff hand and refresh it, go again. So I wouldn't say it's a good thing to be attacked, but there's definitely a mitigation in place that you can get a small boon from being attacked and get a better hand for next turn. But yeah, it plays incredibly quickly, both in terms of the turns themselves are snappy and the game is not overly long. It's a wonderful.
Yeah, it says 90 minutes. It says 45 to 90 minutes, but that might be because it's a 2 to 4 player game. Do you reckon that's accurate?
I think we played it in under 90 minutes with 4.
Yeah, players. I was surprised that you guys were able to get a whole game in.
It really not long. It's very snappy. Now, bear in mind, none of us had played before.
You had the publisher there guiding you, as well as 4 players who hadn't played before.
Yeah, it just meant that anytime we had a question, it was just a matter of asking him. He told us rather than looking into a rulebook. So it definitely. So I guess it simulated 4 players who knew who knew the rules but weren't very well versed in strategy.
Well, and a sort of a barometer I like to pick up as well, actually, is that this is currently a weight 2 on BGG, and that can be a little bit inscrutable for people. So I always like to go to wingspan is a 2.8. So do you think that's about accurate for weight, or maybe it's a little heavier than that, or what do you think it sits?
We've had discussions, Mike, of what we even mean by this, but with my weight, I think that this game is.
I like to use weight as mechanical overhead. I think what's the sort of buy-in?
I think it's equal to wingspan in terms of a player coming in and getting to a point where they understand what's going on. Mm-hmm. I think if anything, it has more depth to it.
Sure.
I don't think this weight of 2 will last. I think it will go up as people get it into their hands.
Yeah, that's fair. I would expect as much from what I saw.
Yeah, I would probably. I mean, if we're going to go with wingspan of a 2.8 as default, I'd give this probably a 3.3 maybe. But it's not particularly heavy. Like I said, you can get to grips with this very easily and very quickly in terms of how and understand how the game works. Very easily. But there's definitely, I believe, and look, I've played it once, obviously, but I believe there's a lot of strategic depth to this, and that you could really get a lot out of it.
Yeah. I mean, as we've said before, games have tended to trend towards becoming heavier. And I think that the sort of weight out of 5 on BGG has become sort of top loaded. So there's an enormous number of games that are packed into the sort of 4 or 3.5 to 5 range. Just because there's a much broader range of games that are heavier now. But I think, this does look sort of quite more light and more accessible. So I'm pleased to sort of hear that it falls sort of around the 3 mark, I think. But I was very surprised to see it here at 2. I don't think that's relatively accurate.
No.
But again, I'm sort of more interested in what is the sort of the rules overhead you need to buy in. Because I think that sort of depth, strategic depth, that's a pleasant outcome of the price you paid to learn. But, what I don't want is to see a game where the rules overhead is a high price to pay and the strategic depth is just not there. That's
no. I think the time and effort
no.
investment for what you get out of it is pretty good.
Brilliant. Well, I'm super hyped to get a chance to play this, and so I hope we can get a copy as soon as possible, and actually maybe have a chance to play it at Essen, given that
let's make the
half
effort.
of us will have played it before.
Let's make the effort. We'll play it first evening, Wednesday evening, or Thursday evening. We'll play it.
Yeah, brilliant. Cool. Well, very very excited for this, and I thought it looked really nice as well. So very keen to check this out in more detail. Hey everybody, and welcome to the Essen special podcast segment featuring Barry. If I've already introduced this, then great, this all went off as planned. And if this has not been introduced, this is the beginning of the podcast, then at least we've got some Essen news for you. In this section, I'm going to be talking to Barry about what he's excited about that's coming out at Essen 2024. How you doing, Barry?
Fine. Unfortunately, I have had to change my shirt. I couldn't keep it on for a third day of recording.
Well, I appreciate your dedication to continuity.
Yeah, people just be wondering why I like getting the 5 o'clock shadow but coming in more, and but yes, Essen. So obviously that big or the biggest convention for board games held in Essen every year, which is why you see it on some board game maps to show that they're true gamers, because otherwise it's quite a small little place.
Yeah.
And whilst I've never been and not going this year again, I'm sure Mike will keep an eye out for anything fun for me. There was a few things I'd seen that I thought might be that were interesting for me. Now these are things that are kind of being released at Essen or not long after, and they're games that I'll probably end up, if not buying, at least playing or checking out very soon after. And so the first one, and we've spoken of this game before, but it's the newest expansion, and that is Forest Shuffle Woodland Edge. So that is
right, which is distinct from the first expansion, Alpine?
Correct, yes.
So this is actually expansion number 2. But when did Alpine come out? I thought that was
Expo.
Like brand new.
Yep.
Wow. So months apart then.
Mm-hmm. Now, how much Kosh had been working on both simultaneously, whether they could have come out in a slightly bigger box, unclear, or whether it's still a balancing expansion. So the Alpine expansion, additional points for butterflies, so you could have a 6th butterfly as part of a set, sorted out some of the weaker strategies. If you play base game at maybe like 2-player, 3-player, you'll find that if one player gets all the wolves and deer, they run away with the game. Other strategies aren't quite as strong. At 3-player, maybe you can go into amphibians, but everything else is a little weaker. Then Alpine made those changes, so it was now worth pursuing some of the other animals a little more. As I said, increasing the score for butterflies, making it easier for scoring bats, and a few other sort of bits and pieces. And this looks to be same again, right? So it is adding more, effectively dilutes the wolves and deer anyway, by adding more different cards, and it buffs some of the other cards to make it easier. For example, there's now 6 species of bats instead of the 3 from the core game, and where you needed all 3 to score points. You still need 3, but now there's more to choose from when they come up.
So you're telling me that the Alpine expansion didn't introduce Alpine wolves to boost the wolf strat?
No, I don't think there was any Alpine wolves. There were vultures. So cave strategies, the vulture, I think, let you score for everything in your cave, and there was other ways of putting cards into your cave. I just rounded out some of the, I won't say flaws necessarily, but some of the weaknesses of identifying a strong strategy early on in the base game. And this one looks to expand on things like saplings. You've probably never played a sapling. You can play any card from your hand face down as a sapling, which is a tree. Doesn't count as one of the species of trees, but then you can play cards onto it, play animals onto it, or birds or whatever. And
I've never found myself in a situation where I've been like, I don't have any trees and desperately need one.
Correct. So this, but it's an option, and it's always been an option. It's one way of burying wolves and deer if you think that your opponent is going to get them, or if you're going to spend them at a point where it's not going to go into the supply or into the clearing where they'll be able to take them.
This may look like a big deer, but it's actually a tiny tree.
Exactly. And so there's a buff to the sort of sapling strats that there was a little bit of that in Alpine. I think it introduced a new type of tree, which is a shrubbery, which you must cut down the largest one in the forest with a fish. But it's just a tree with additional benefits, and a few other. I've not looked at all the animals on it. I believe the expansion's already available on Board Game Arena, which seems to be a good testing ground for these expansions. They get on there early. But I still enjoy Forest Shuffle, or Foray Shuffle, as I like to call it, and playing it at the weekend again, and it's still a fun, decent game, particularly when you do the drafting and play it properly, and if you are a little more cutthroat. So hopefully this expansion just gives a lot more variety, makes some other strategies a little stronger, to round out the game a little more. It's not a huge box expansion again, it looks to just be a few cards, so it doesn't change the core part of the game, but I'm in.
Yeah, I bounced off Forest Shuffle, which I talked about precisely because of the, perceived imbalances in the various strategic routes. I found particularly the butterflies to be the most unfortunate because they're scoring, as one of the nice things about Forest Shuffle, at least from it sort of at a glance, is that it's got the kind of presentation and rule set that might appeal to a broad range of board gamers, relatively new people to the hobby, or more embedded people in the hobby as well. And certainly, it's got very pleasing art and a lovely theme. And the sort of core conceit of the having to discard things face up to a central marketplace, but then it resets. It can be quite exciting, and adds a little bit of nice tension. So it was disappointing to me that something like the butterflies, which I think is the most sort of obvious strategy to people who are less experienced with this kind of game, like for example, the strategy of deer and wolves, which we observed in the first game, being too strong. It's the kind of strategy where it's looking at icons and triggering off icons to allow additional card draw. And then the more icons you get, it's going to sort of compound end game scoring. And these things are second nature to hobbyists like us, but certainly probably a little more opaque to people who are newer to the hobby, where, the butterflies are just collect as many as you can and score points the more you have, which I think is a lot more accessible. But it sucks. In the base game, it's just a complete
in terms of points there.
Yeah. It's just never going to beat any of the other strategies. So it's good to hear that they're balancing it out. That's what put me off the game. But now that they've brought out these 2 expansions pretty quickly, and I'd certainly be keen to, because I like the basic game. I like the sort of the core game loop, and it sits at that nice sort of sort of 30 to 40 minute mark as well, which I'm increasingly interested in finding games that sit well at that mark. So yeah, I'd be keen to try it with one or both expansions.
Well, much like how quickly they pump out expansions, they also pump out promos. So if you see any while you're there, pick them up. We must be up to about 16, 17 promos at this point.
Who's the publisher for
Lookout Spiel.
Lookout Spiel. Well, they'll definitely be there, so I'll swing by their booth and see what
I
they've
doubt
got.
you'll be able to get them all, because some are published only in America, some are published only in Germany, which you'll get for these ones, or other countries. It's an odd system of promo releases, but
for the American release, they had the Grizzly Bear, and at UKG they had the Kestrel, and in Germany they've got the Autobahn.
So if you see one, get one. Yeah, that famous animal, the Autobahn.
Yeah, it's actually just a card that shows some tragic deaths on the German highways.
Roadkill.
Yeah.
Can remove a card from another player's forest. But speaking of native Germans, another game I'm looking at, I don't know if necessarily I'm looking forward to, right, because I don't know that much about it, but it is Power Grid Outpost. So this is by Frieden Fries and published by Rio Grande. And this is a re-implementation of Outpost, which I don't know a huge amount about. I know it wasn't super well received, but it seems to be Power Grid with an engine building slant. So you don't have the map as far as I'm aware, it's all card driven, but I think you've got the auction part for like your power plants and stuff, but your cards do other things, right? So it's not just power, and you'll be able to build up a small engine to power these plants, and I think the Power Grid part of it is to still the same kind of end goal where whoever powers the most and best power plants wins. So I should have brought maybe a more of a look, but I do enjoy Power Grid. I think it's a very interesting game, and where you're competing over your networks, and the auction element of the games. I enjoy auction games, so having this auction element of the games interesting as well. People kind of stop playing with me because they say I always win. I don't think that's true. Sure, I have won the last couple of games, and it wasn't close. But but I don't think I'm any good at it. I just happen to time things right and get the auctions right. So something like this could be interesting to if it's the same kind of feel with an engine building element, which is another cool board game mechanism. If it gives you the same feel in a shorter time without the map, and instead replaces the area control and the network building type part of the game with an engine building, I'd be interested to see it. So I should look more into what Outpost is to get a better idea, but hopefully they've made some refinements and made it a little more thematic for the Power Grid element of it. And this one seems to be set in space as well.
Oh, interesting. So this is Power Grid Outpost. And you're telling me that this is a sort of a re-implementation of Outpost now with Power Grid flavor.
Correct.
And I quite liked Power Grid. I held it in my collection for a long time. Eventually I got rid of it because I found that, and this is a very common complaint. It's nothing, particularly insightful for me here, but, towards the end of the game, it becomes very, very calculational. Yep. And, that would put a lot of people off. And the stuff I really liked about the game, which is to say the sort of route building, area control on the map, and of course the auctions, which are great fun, and the resource management as well. The dynamic market, albeit it's not that dynamic, but just enough. That's all fun, and I really like that. And I would love to see a sort of re-implementation of Power Grid that doesn't have that sort of end game phase where it just becomes really, really mathsy. Mm-hmm. I don't know if maybe this could deliver on that, but I'd certainly be keen to take a look because Frieden Fries is obviously a prolific designer. And, while they do have some really big hits. They also have some pretty strong misses, but at least they're usually doing interesting things. So definitely keen to take a look at that in more detail.
Yeah, I would hope there's some changes. The original Outpost game, made by or designed by James Lavati and Timothy Moore, and published by Stronghold.
Okay, so it's not actually Friedman's game originally.
No, but he's certainly credited as the designer on the Board Game Geek page. But that could just be the power grid element. But basically, you're buying.
So is it all three of them on this?
Oh, that's a good question. Let's have a little look. No, just Friedman Freeze.
Right. So they've sort of seen this design and they've said, "Hey, this is interesting. Maybe I can redevelop this using some of my own principles and see what happens."
I mean, I'm sure they've licensed it or whatever, but not to the degree that it seems the other designers are credited. Or maybe it will be once it's published. I don't know. Like it's coming out at Essen, as far as I'm aware. And the game is you're buying your engine parts, and then in the original Outpost, your staffed factories are worth points. So much like Power Grid, when you power your plants, they're worth points, and then it's first to sort of 75 points wins the game, and powering a factory can be anything from 1 to 20 points. But I'm hoping there's something clever with the engine building element that's been introduced to elevate the game to that next level.
Nice. Well, I'll certainly keep an eye out for that.
Nice. Another game I was keeping my eye on, and something I'll probably pick up because I like these kind of games, is Bomb Busters. So this is a game designed by, I think, Japanese designer Hisashi Hayashi. Yeah, that sounds right. And
is that the designer of... published by Pegasus Spiel. Is that the designer of... oh God, what's it called? Yeah.
He's definitely done other stuff. Please hold, I'll tell
you.
The
Number. Did he design the Number?
I don't know. He did Trains.
Right.
Which is... and Yokohama, apparently.
Oh, yeah, okay. I've got Yokohama. Yeah.
Yeah, fine.
That's recently been reprinted as well.
And Railways of Nippon, Tricks of the Rails. So he's a train guy at heart, it seems. So the original game was Bomb Squad, but however you say that in Japanese, I think. And it is a deduction game where you know your wires, and you're trying to... The aim of the game is to disarm the bomb by clipping all the wires in order, like 1 through 12, without cutting a bad wire. So you've got your wires numbered 1 through 12, and the bad wires are something like 4.5. So it sits between your 4 and your 5. So when you're given clues as to what your wires are, because other people have to cut your wires generally, or tell you which ones to cut, they can never be 100% sure that it's not a bad one. Maybe not.
Right, like the red wire that sets the bomb off.
Correct, yeah. So you don't want to be cutting the red wires. And this game, imagine if you've got all 4 of the number ones, you can show them and you're like, well, here's all the ones, right? Because nobody else has got a 1. You know with certainty these are the ones. But otherwise, you've lined them up in numerical order, and the bad ones sit in between numbers. And so if a player says, oh, show me your 3, you turn around your 3, and then they kind of know what that one is. And then they'll be like, oh, your next one must be a 4. And they go to cut it, and actually it's a 3.5. But it blows up, or you lose a life at least. And once you lose sort of cut 3 wrong wires, it's game over. But this game, the re-implementation or the republication of this one has, for some reason, cute anthropomorphic bunnies and stuff on it. Entirely unrelated to the theme, really. But the key part is there's a bunch of missions. I think there's an original one as well. But you're given missions which get progressively harder as you go through them. You don't really need the missions to play the game. You can always replay a mission. It's not the kind of thing where it's a static order to the mission. It's a little bit like The Crew. So you'll be dealt different cards every time. In this case, you'll be dealt different wires every time. And it's the things that impact what clues you can give and who can do what is what the mission kind of changes the rules on. So the game can be interesting, not just at the beginner level, but as you move up. And I don't think you need to go all the way to the hardest difficulty to have a challenge, but the option is there if you want to. So this kind of deduction and logic puzzle type game is interesting to me. Although I don't like games like Hanabi. And so what I hope doesn't happen is it doesn't devolve into a secret way of giving clues without giving clues type game.
Right.
It's like,
well, we're talking about cooperative games with communication restrictions where people develop conventions and expect you to understand conventions.
Yeah, and I guess actually that's the main way of describing this game, right? The communication limitations is what makes the game. Otherwise, it'd be a little dull. Cut this one, and then they cut that one. And I think you've got like special powers you can use on your turn as well as your basic actions. And just I like deduction games, and I think this looks like a fun one. I like co-op deduction games as well. So keen to play. And again, if you're walking past the booth and you see the bonus 3 mission booklet, by all means, do pick it up.
Sure thing. I'll definitely go and check that out for you.
Another game that is a spin-off of a bigger game that I like is Rajas of the Ganges, Cards and Karma. So Rajas of the Ganges, and this one, a game by Inka Brand and Marcus Brand, who also do all the Exit escape games, which I've stopped buying. I initially enjoyed all the Exit games, and now not so much. Still maybe get a calendar. Enjoy the calendar. But this is published by Hutch! And Rajas of the Ganges is a dice rolling, dice placement, sort of worker placement using your dice. Euro game where the end game trigger, and I think this was the first one, so ahead of Arc Nova, there's 2 tracks that you're moving along, your karma track and your money track, and when those cross, that signals the end of the game. So much like Arc Nova, when your tickets and your attractions, I can't remember now, cross over, signals the end of the game. But this is really, Rajas of the Ganges is very good.
Yeah, big fan of Rajas.
Sort of dice placement, as dice as workers game.
Yes. It's got it's hard to summarize Rajas really, but it's dice worker placement, I guess.
Yeah, so and you got ways of manipulating the dice, and you can go to different actions and the different spots on the board let you do different things. There's a track to move up that gets you different things at different times, and once you get to the end, well, that's it. So you got to time that correctly. You unlock additional workers because you need a worker to go with a dice. And your dice kind of determines what action you can take.
I struggle to remember exactly how it works.
Well, if you send a worker to buy a tile, so you've also got your own player board where you're building up a tableau which connects to bonuses on the outside of the grid and empowers different actions you can take on the board. But if you went to that market, for example, you'd be able to build a tile or buy a tile equal to the dice that you spend. So you send the worker to the spot to buy a tile, and you spend the dice as the value of the tile you can take. So if you have a 6 orange and a 3 orange, you could spend both of them to buy an 8 orange. You wouldn't get any change. But you couldn't buy any of the purples or the blues using those dice, for example. It's a tricky one to explain when it's not in front of you. When you're playing, I don't think it's that difficult to follow along with, but to do well, of course, is, well, what do I focus on? Do I focus on fame? Do I try and unlock an extra worker? Do I go up the river track quickly to unlock an extra worker? Do I work on building up my tableau, so when I go to the income spot, I get more stuff for having a tea house and I forget what the other 2 resource types are for income. And it's a very solid game. So this being a smaller version is of interest. It doesn't seem to be exactly the same. The game looks like it was 2 to 4 players, same as the Rajas of the Ganges. And you have a track. It looks like a personal track that you're going along, and when you hit conditions, you flip them over. I imagine the game ends when you flipped all the conditions on your personal board, but you are still buying tiles, or at least using tiles in the middle of the board. I've not read the rules, but just the fact that his Rajas of the Ganges was enough to pique my interest. Now, it could be that there's already a dice game of Rajas of the Ganges, even though Rajas of the Ganges is a dice game. And that never really, I never played it, but nobody was really talking about it. So it could just be another, middle of the road type endeavor for this. And then a game that I have talked about in a previous podcast is getting its sequel at Essen, and that is Perspectives Blue. So this is a game by Matthew Dunstan and Dave Neal, both of whom we've spoken about at length before.
I was going to say Matthew Dunstan, never heard of him.
Yeah, this is a fella published by Space Cowboys. And if you perhaps recall from the post UKGE episode, I spoke at length that we discovered Perspectives in the game library there and had an absolute blast playing it. So we played it at above the highest recommended player count. We played it at 3-player, played it at 6-player, played it at 7-player, and it is a game where each player is dealt a card with some information on it, or multiple cards with some information on it. So you have part of the puzzle, and you have to deduce by sharing verbally kind of what you see on the card, what you think might be useful, and then as a team, you can reveal one card to the whole table. So you're like, well, actually, I've got the key here that shows what the this symbol translates to. I know you've got the other half of that's looking for the code, describing an upside down bat wing with a sailboat on the top. Could take some time to try and do over the table, so I'm just going to show this one and then we can work it out together. But you can then share more of those cards if you're still not unsure of the solution, but you're trying to solve a mystery, or like a Sherlock Holmes style murder, or maybe somebody's stolen something, or maybe there's been a kidnapping and you need to know who was behind it all. And so the first one had those 3 cases that was in it, and we played them all at the expo, and it was just great, right? So
so this is another cooperative game.
Yeah.
And you're all working together to solve the mystery of the cards.
Correct. And I know people, I think maybe you discussed something, bounced off this one hard and didn't enjoy it at all. But I think a big part of it comes down to, of course, who you're playing with in these ones, and whether you like these kind of games and whether you can make those leaps in logic. So we had no problems with the actual flow of the story. Everything made sense to us. We spotted everything. The one mess up where we didn't quite score maximum points, so you're rated at the end for how well we've done, and we got like 16 points, 14 points, 14 points. So there's a couple of bits that we missed in the second and third ones. One of them, not to give too much away, but somebody didn't explain what was on their card properly. So if you've got people like that in your team where they're not picking up on those clues, then this could be a total bust. But as long as you're confident that your teammates are giving you the information you need, and you can spend a bit of time putting it together, which we did, everything made sort of perfect sense to us, and was a really good mystery to solve in each story. So I'm very optimistic that this will be the same, and I will definitely be buying and playing this at earliest opportunity.
Nice. Well, I've not heard of Perspectives, so I will go and have a look at Perspectives Blue at the show and see see what's going on.
And then, apart from that, most of the stuff that I'm interested in, I've already ordered or or will be getting. I think Deep Sea Endeavour should be on its way to me this week or next week, perhaps. I think there was a slight delay. Kelp should be coming out as well very soon, perhaps next week again. King of Tokyo Duel. I'll at least find somebody that's got it to try a game before I decide whether or not I want to buy it. And one game that I didn't back in the start of the year when I was trying not to buy games was Conservus, which is the Scott Alms solo game for sending out your fishing fleet to bring back the stuff for tinned fish and then selling it at the market. I think I should have just backed it. I think I would quite like it, looking at it, but I can always buy it when it comes out proper.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, nice. Well, it's good because that's all stuff that was not really on my list, and I've got a fair few. I've been working my way through the BGG preview list and sort of
1,177 of them.
Yeah, and obviously you can't really look at them all, but what it does that's quite helpful actually is it summarizes the mechanisms and things like that. So where I see a sort of publisher or designer that I'm interested in, I'll certainly check it out. But if I see a set of mechanisms that I'm interested in, I'll go and look at that too, because sometimes the more interesting stuff is coming from unknown areas. And I've certainly found some games that way that I've been particularly enamored with, albeit they don't always get played as often as I would like. It seems to be a harder sell, but anyway, Deep Sea Endeavour is one that I'm quite keen to check out as well, and certainly I'll be swinging by the what are they called, the Gamers Guild?
You can tell me anything.
Grand Gamers Guild, I think. Again, I've not got my computer here, so if that's wrong, I apologize. But I'll be swinging by the Grand Gamers Guild booth to check that out.
Grand Gamers Guild, yes. That is a real company, staffed with real people.
Nice. Well, thank you, Barry, for your contribution, and we'll go back to me and Chris, if that section exists, and see what we're saying to close out the show. The other thing I'll mention quickly as well is there will not be an episode on Wednesday 9. The Essen Special, I suppose, is sort of a stand-in for that, and we'll be back to schedule the next, not Wednesday the 16th, but the following Wednesday that we are due to have an episode out. So we'll be back on schedule after that, but we'll be missing the next one because it's just not compatible with the Essen schedule.
Right, well, have fun at Essen, and I will catch you when you're back.
Thanks, Barry. I think that's going to wrap up our Essen preview. But just to wrap this up, make sure you follow us on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube, where we will post stuff onto at least one of those platforms. So just so you don't miss it.
Yeah. Follow us on all the socials to see how our Essen goes. And if you're there and you see us, please say hi. We're often in the pub in the evening. If you're there, come stay in with us.
Exactly. And just make sure you say hello. But I hope you're all excited for Essen, and I hope this has helped highlight some stuff you might not have otherwise thought to check out. Yeah, to point as well, you can find all of the links and everything you need on the YouTube page. We are primarily a YouTube channel. Ready, Steady, Play on YouTube. You can't miss it. But links will be in the description, if this has a description where you found it.
Merry Essenmas, everyone.
Bye for now.
Bye.